Welcome everyone to the first in a series of 3 Startup Know-How panel discussions for the spring 2021 semester, offered by IALS Venture Development in collaboration with the UMass Amherst Technology Transfer Office. Today we will be discussing how to apply for and win SBIR, STTR awards. I apologize for that. For those of you who do not know me, I am Lisa Korpieski, the Director of Communications and Marketing here at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences. Just a few housekeeping items. This seminar is being recorded. If you miss any part of this panel discussion or would like to forward it to someone who could not attend, there will be a replay of this and all previous seminars in this series on our website. I recommend you set your view mode to speaker. Please stay muted during the talks. We will save the Q&A until the end of the presentation. During that time, I welcome you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Also, you can put your question in the chat and it will be monitored by our panelists during the presentation. Next, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Karen Ukov, who is the Director of Venture Development here at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences and Site Director for I-Corps at UMass Amherst. Karen?
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to see so many familiar faces and new faces as well. We're going to talk today about applying for and winning SBIR, STTR support for your startup. We have a stellar panel that you'll get to know this afternoon. Julie Bliss Mullen, who is CEO and founder of Aclarity Water. Dan Lilly, who is a Small Business Innovation Research Advisor at the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center. Julian Lustig-Gonzalez, who's co-founder and VP Finance at AuCoDe. Both Aclarity and AuCoDe are SBIR companies. And Vinit Nijhawan, who is Managing Director at MassVentures and has tons of experience with SBIRs. So let's get started. So the mission of the SBIR program is to support scientific excellence and technological innovation through the investment of in federal research funds in critical American priorities. This is a very broad-based program. And I think you can see from the bullets below the mission that really this comes at a point when a company may not have many other sources of funding. It comes typically after basic research that occurs in a university environment, but before the time when private sector investors would want to get involved. So the program comes in 3 phases. Phase 1 establishes technical merit. It's really for some agencies would say proof of concept. Phase 2 is only open to phase 1 recipients. So already phase 1, if you win one, is opening opportunities for you. Phase 2 projects continue technical development and help companies prepare for commercialization. And phase 3 has no funding typically available coming with it, but is programmatic and helps SBIR recipients pursue commercialization opportunities. That said, details vary, and details vary because this is a very broad-based program. Funding awards can come through 12 different federal agencies. These span, the mission and all 3 phases span all agencies. The implementation and priorities vary across agencies. As well, the actual structure of the programs vary considerably. So funding levels might be a little different. The National Institutes of Health programs actually are spread across the individual institutes within it. Department of Defense has a procurement component. They want to invest in projects that they might actually want to buy the products from those companies. And the National Science Foundation specifically is not a procurement program, but instead is focused on technological development in all areas that NSF supports. Another nuance is that some awards are grants and some are contracts. So these can be very exciting awards, but again, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of details to absorb. We will not be going over all of these. For those of you who are thinking, how can I take on a big award like this as a small company that's just been created, I also want to remind you that there are opportunities here to subcontract back to the university research labs. And so there are lots of good ways that SBI or STTR awards actually facilitate transfer from university labs out. And some of those are actually administrative as well as funding. So our panel I mentioned before, and I'm going to turn it over to them now. We'll just say I'm very excited to have this panel. We have tried really hard to bring multiple perspectives to this. So listen to each of them. They are each experts in their own right. And we'll move on first to Julie Bliss Mullen. Julie is founder and CEO of Aclarity, and I will let her tell you the rest.
Thank you, Karen. First of all, I think that the Sbir program is fantastic. So I founded Aclarity back in 2017. Basically what we do is we design and we build water treatment systems to revolutionize water treatment. You can check us out below if you're interested in learning more. But I think SBIRs are really important. They're really important for getting initial funding for your company and for your idea, depending on what type of venture you want to get into. From my perspective, I've been a PI on 2 SBIRs, both from the National Science Foundation. We got our first SBIR in 2018. I wrote that SBIR for the most part, but I think one of the tips I have there is to take advantage of resources. We worked with Dan Lilly and his group. We had a lot of support from UMass, from IALS, from the Birth Hume Center. So there's a lot of resources out there to, read through some of your executive summaries. All that's utilizing your resources is extremely important for the SBIR. To answer these questions, what has been the technology development impact of the NSF SBIR funding that Aclarity has received? So the National Science Foundation and most of the others as well. That being said, we have applied for others. We applied for an NIH grant, and we also applied for Air Force SBIR, both this past year, and we didn't get either of them. It's definitely a time. It's a very saturated time. But getting this phase 1 and phase 2 from the SBIR has really propelled the company from a technology standpoint, but it's also really helped to hone down in specific markets as well, because we want to make sure that we're designing products and we're conducting basic research, but we're formulating that basic research into real products. I mean, our phase 2 is not moving away, but building upon our first product, our first contract manufactured real product, and actually building that out. So now it's much bigger. It's cheaper. We've been doing tons of feasibility studies, and all that has propelled our company so that we can leverage more funding, and we can grow the team. The SBIR phase 2 is for $1 million, and it can be used for over 2 years. So we've been able to significantly build out the team. I said before, I wrote our phase 1 first, essentially a business plan and then a research plan. And then the phase 2, now we have a director of R&D, we have a director of sales, we have a bunch of engineers who've helped as well, and we've now actually started to contract our grant writing out. So able to build the team with this funding, able to advance the product, able to advance the market, really find out what our customers want, and get the funding we need to move the company forward. What has been the impact of the SBIR funding on your commercialization efforts? I kind of said that already, but the SBIR funding has enabled us to prove out our product in various markets. We now have leading customers, you know, in the water treatment industry, and it was really because of our SBIR efforts. One thing that goes along with that is it's you know, most of us come from academia, and although half of the report is essentially an R&D kind of RFP, the other half is commercialization. And so they really want to make sure that you understand who your customers are, who your market is, how big it is, what's the need, and they want to make sure it's justified. So spending time doing customer discovery and really understanding who your market is, and proving out, you know, I talked to 75 customers in this industry, and they, you know, 50% agree that, you know, there are specific targets that they want to see, and if those targets essentially should be what you're trying to aim for in the SBIR. So it's a combination of technology and commercialization, and I wouldn't say that either of them is more important. They're both equally important. I've been layering in some tips in here, but tips for applying for an SBIR or Sttr. I have a couple tips. One is to get in touch with your program director, and if you don't know who that is, you can do a search online. Or you can contact somebody at the organization that you're applying for and ask. and it's so important to contact that person and send them some kind of executive summary. Depending on the agency, sometimes they have an actual summary format to send beforehand to qualify, and other times it's more loose. But absolutely contact them, make sure they know who you are. My program director has followed me in our company for probably 3 years now, since we got our first phase one. And she was, you know, every time there's something really exciting that comes out from Aclarity on a press release or whatnot, she's almost always the first one to send me a message saying congratulations. And, you know, so they're very invested, especially in the National Science Foundation. They're very invested in their PIs and very invested in their portfolio companies. So that's a big tip. Get to know your program director. Another one is get letters of support from customers, even if they're not customers yet. If they're potential customers, talk to them again. Figure out what they want to see, because that should be your goal for the SBIR from the technology side. But NSF, I think, will allow for 5 customer or stakeholder letters of support. That's really important. Other organizations, I think, are a little bit more flexible about it, but it's so important. Another one, real quick, is follow directions. It sounds so silly, but if you don't follow the directions, you will immediately be discarded. I'm talking font sizes and margins, and you know, labeling your sections, and all that's just so important. I will say the budget's also very important, but as a reviewer for SBIRs, personally, I feel like the budget has room to grow. You want to make sure that the budget is as solid as humanly possible in the beginning, but you have flexibility to change it over time if it needs to be changed. So absolutely, like I said, work really hard to make sure that that budget is solid, but know that there's flexibility. And I think Dan and Vinit can probably comment on that more. Tips for maximizing the value of an award. I always try to rope in customers. So one of our big goals is to have a pilot with one of our big customers for this SBIR, and this is using our big SKU. So it's we've already tested the smaller one. We're now testing the big one with a big company, and that gets the company really excited because you've already gotten this funding, and you've already been validated by whatever company is or whatever organization is funding you, and that gets them excited. That gets them you into their door a little bit more, and when you have pilots with tier 1 companies that are in your industry, it just gets everybody else excited and just validates your company even more. That's what I have for now.
Thank you, Julie. That's great. Those are all great tips. And I'm especially a fan of the tip that you follow directions. It is so important. And yet it seems so simple. I'll also comment that Julie pointed out that you don't have to stick with one agency, which is really important to be aware of. I'm sorry you weren't funded by everybody else, Julie, but it's well worth looking at different agencies, because often, of course, they're not going to pay you to do the same thing, but very often if there's a special market or a special application, there's no need to limit yourself to one agency. So next up is Julian Lustig-Gonzalez, who is going to talk about the CFO's perspective. So he has done he's done the budget stuff. He's aware of indirect rates and all of those things that are significant concerns. So Julian, would you unmute please and take it away?
Absolutely. Hold on to your seats, everyone. This is going to get exciting. Okay, so as Karen mentioned, thank you so much for the intro. I'm Julian Lustig-Gonzalez. I'm a co-founder and CFO, VP Finance. Titles become more important over time as the company begins to solidify a little more. AuCoDe is a machine learning research and development firm. We're helping to solve many of the internet's systemic problems, such as manufactured controversy, misinformation, disinformation spread. We're also the recipients of 2 SBIRs, a Phase 1 and Phase 2 through the National Science Foundation. I'm just going to kind of combine the first 2 questions here and dive right into it, because I've got a significant number of tips I can share. And just to give you some context, before joining AuCoDe, I was a controller for a defense contractor where I ended up writing the commercialization sections and budgets for something along the line of 15, 18-ish, somewhere in there. SBIRs, of which we won about 12, so pretty good win rate. So let's first start about what has the impact been for AuCoDe as a company winning a Phase 2 SBIR. I'd say developing good company habits. Having worked with a lot of startups, it's very easy to play fast and loose and just deal with things as they come up. And I would say that this really forces you to look at a smoother transition from a sweat equity fueled organization where everyone's working weekends and late night and just rushing to get things done, to an organization that now has paid, benefited employees with their own rights and their own needs. And you need to be running payroll regularly. You need to be compliant with federal and state laws. There are lots of things that you need to be able to figure out. And the SBIR, I think, in many ways, fast tracks you into that before you end up having a much larger, more expensive problem. It's preventative. I would also say it's been excellent in terms of a credibility marker. Winning an SBIR is essentially the National Science Foundation saying, hey, this technology is valuable. How valuable? Maybe $250,000. We're willing to put some funding behind this because there's a credible team behind it. They've got some real game-changing technology, impactful technology, and we as a government organization would like to nurture this as America's seed fund, really as one of your first investors. And I'll get into that a little bit later in terms of viewing NSF as an investor rather than as a gift, which it isn't. I would also say that there's a certain amount of value through the supplemental funding that's available, and I know that there's a lot more supplemental funding that's available through the Phase 2 program. I'd have to review if there are programs available through the Phase 1, and Dan could probably speak to this with a little more confidence. But I can tell you that having access to supplemental funding programs is essentially additional carrots on sticks. When you're talking to a strategic partner and you can say, hey, there's a program through the National Science Foundation to unlock an additional tranche of funding, so that way we can work together, we can pilot a program, and it's not going to be entirely you don't have to shoulder the burden here of the cost of making this work. We can come to the table carrying our own funding has been pretty instrumental in moving forward some conversations with potential strategic partners. Likewise, the Phase 2B supplemental funding program, which matches investment dollars, 50% up to $1 million, meaning that you could bring in an additional $500,000 on an investment round matched through the National Science Foundation, an incredibly powerful benefit that could be brought to the table in negotiations with investors. Last thing I'll mention in terms of how it's impacted us specifically is in strategic IP positioning. Now, IP and IP expenses are not allowable under the, well, okay, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but there are ways that you can pay for intellectual property costs, but without having to think of creative and inventive ways, the NSF provides an avenue called another one of these supplemental funding programs, technical and business assistance, an entire tranche of money available to you, allocated to you, that you just need to write a simple proposal and submit, allowing you to work with a patent attorney, to work with TTO potentially, to work with any number of organizations to move forward your commercialization goals. And so, you know, there's a lot of different opportunities to explore within the SBIR program, and it doesn't just stop at the initial funding stage. So I think that's important to just keep into context. So here's just a couple of tips from having lived in this space for a while. I think right at the beginning, as you're sitting down for your first proposal for an SBIR phase one, start to think about what is a compelling commercial or social narrative that's going to be consistent throughout the entire proposal. You definitely don't want to just kind of ad hoc, because it does seem at times when you're approaching the SBIR that there's different disparate sections. Julie mentioned this. You have your research plan and then you have your commercialization plan. They should be so intertwined that they're, you know, not necessarily directly referencing each other, but there is a narrative that is weaved between both of them. Why are you developing this widget or feature? It's because it specifically ties to this larger commercial vision we have. Again, you know, the SBIR is not a gift. It's not free. They are your investor and they have their own objectives. And to that point, you should understand what it is that they want. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by these Q&A questions. I'll try and block them out. So learning what your program officer or your program director's objectives are and being able to work with them so that they have a successful outcome from your company. Is it you raising money? That's wonderful. Is it you bringing a product to market? That's excellent. I think having a better understanding, and this is especially important as you begin to explore other agencies. So the NSF has a very specific America's Seed Fund. We want to see you succeed as a company. Department of Defense may have a very different objective in terms of why they are funding you. To Karen's point, it could be procurement. You know, they might be happy to have you be a single product, small company that is able to meet the needs of a specific department of or agency within the Department of Defense. Identify a compliance partner early. This is very important because you're going to have a lot of questions. To Julie's point, there are amazing resources here. However, there is a certain level of relief you can have knowing that you are lowering your liability to a certain extent. You're saying, hey, we went and we contracted with, and it's money well spent, contracted with this specialty firm that told us this is the right way to do it. It's not the right way. Well, you know, we are not going to work with them anymore. I'm terribly sorry, NSF. And that it gives you an avenue to be able to keep the conversation going. It's not necessarily you acting out of your own interpretation of federal acquisition regulations and DFAR, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations. You're getting a second informed opinion, and it can really help you as you're crafting your strategy for how you want to spend the award funding. Couple of other things. I will say the DoD has amazing resources beyond just going in and applying for these grants. If you're trying to look for commercial validation, a lot of times, just checking with every solicitation cycle, if you see things that are tangentially related to your technology, within that solicitation, there will often be a commercialization paragraph, which sometimes is written just, you know, basically back of a napkin and then typed up. I will say some of them are very vague, but sometimes there's a significant amount of thought and purpose put into these commercial applications of the technology that, say, the Army or Air Force is looking for. And that can be a really interesting jumping off point to start thinking about alternative applications of your technology you may not have originally considered. You can also use the contact information for the people who are releasing the solicitation as future customer discovery. I suggest you don't do this when the solicitation cycle is open because they're getting a lot of calls, but we have absolutely circled back with people a couple of months after a solicitation cycle ends to say, hey, we know that you had this problem because you wrote out an entire solicitation about it. Can we talk to you a little bit more about how this is impacting you at the Army, at the Navy, at the Air Force, or NASA? You know, it doesn't always have to be military if that's an objection. So, you know, I did make mention of the supplemental funding. I'll just very quickly say there's three major ones. There's TABA for connecting with your potential third-party providers, your IP attorneys, maybe you want to get an animated video made, or you want to get some sort of additional service. This isn't necessarily money that you can allocate internally, but you can find a nice commercial service provider that can help you in some way. The TECP is a technology enhancement for commercial partnerships, is a nice tranche of funding. Again, you can unlock specifically for pilot programs. You find the perfect strategic strategic partner, and you want to work with them to further your goal of commercialization. They may end up being, you know, a potential acquirer of your technology or company, or someone you might license the technology to. This is a special tranche of funding you can unlock specifically to do a pilot program, and the NSF really encourages you to do that. And then the Phase 2B, which is an encouragement to bring on outside investment. So as you're going out and you're fundraising, remember you've crafted this compelling social or business narrative early on, and you've kept it consistent, and you've furthered and developed it. Even if you know that your technology has broad application, figure out a beachhead market, figure out an initial market, and stay focused, because it is much better to go deep than go broad. If you come to the NSF and you say, our thing can be used in any way you can imagine, I would argue that your chances of getting it are much less than saying, it could be, you know, one paragraph, it could be used in all these ways, but we have decided to focus on this particular application, and now here are 15 pages where we're going to describe it in excruciating detail. So yeah, that's I guess one point I will make on budget, I don't want to go too deep into it, is just that when you are building the budget, justification is everything. You know, every single item that you have on that budget, you need to find some way to be able to justify it with something that is not you. You can't say my salary should be $200,000. Why? Because I say so. That won't fly with the National Science Foundation. However, if you say that my salary is justified by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which states that someone with this particular title has a median income of this amount in this region, and here's my evidence to prove that, that is justification. And so as you're building your budget, don't build the budget and then try to back into justification. As you are building each piece, be looking for and saving and organizing your data for reference later, because you will need to submit it. Justification for every single piece that's on there. Why are you charging this much for data costs? Find some way to be able to justify it. Find a quote online that says that this particular amount of data is equated to this much, and back into the amount that you need by breaking it down using that evidence. So yeah, lots more I could say on all these topics, but I think for now, I'll just wait until the Q&A session.
Thank you, Julian. That was great. Lots of excellent advice. We're going to turn now to Daniel Lilly. Dan, can you unmute and share your wisdom? I think you were telling me before that you've worked on over 200 SBIR applications for small companies. So we're looking forward to your wisdom.
Well, because of that, it kind of makes it that I've got to stay at a high level here. So, you know, the details are really available one-on-one after to register with us is down in the bottom left. But yeah, I've done about probably 200 of these. We work for the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center, funded by UMass Amherst and the Small Business Administration, to provide assistance to small businesses in Massachusetts. And my specific role is in the SBIR field. In that role, we work mostly actually with university spinouts from across Massachusetts. And I would say about 90% of my pipeline is founders coming out of universities with technologies that have yet to be proven and will eventually be businesses. We work to teach you the basics of where the opportunities lie and how to pursue them. So we take a look at who's been funding, teaching you who has been funding your type of research or tangentially related, so that we can figure out if we care, if they care. We will then take you through the process of teaching you how to do that outreach, which Julie had talked about being so important, and it is. And I have to say, Julie and Julian's piece was very well placed and well done. And because a lot of times you'll find out that it's so important to speak to the folks who are going to be your customers first. Remember, you're not selling, the customer's buying. I once had a client come to me that had spent 2 years of his life writing a proposal that was never going to get funded by the person he was writing it to, and he just never bothered to make the call. So we try to make sure that we teach you how to identify who to speak to up front. Because when we finally spoke to him, he said, well, you have a platform technology. And Julian talked about how utilizing a platform can be very important, and then talking more specifically about it. The program officer said, I don't fund platforms. Talk to this guy over here. He does. So we wrote basically the same proposal that he had for 4 rounds, and we got him funded. So a lot of it is communication, and we teach you the ins and outs of that process. We additionally will take a look at your proposal and first the outreach to the program officer. If you write something up, we want to make sure you put your best foot forward. So we'll review that. And then if invited to propose, we will work with you piece by piece on the proposal, acting as your first reviewer and teaching the process that is necessary. And then show you where the shortcomings are in the proposal. Having read as many reviews as I have, I can tell the mindset of a number of reviewers. And I know everyone, or a number of people on the panel have been reviewers, and I'm sorry, I've said bad things about all of you, I think, but I didn't know it was you. But I teach you the ins and outs of how to understand not only what is said in the proposal, but what's not said. And more importantly, what's meant by what's being meant by what is said, because oftentimes what seems like a compliment may not be. So we'll talk to you about that. And then if this proposal goes in and is funded, we will work with you on understanding what the comments were, so that as you prepare for phase 2, you accentuate the positives of what you did in your phase 1 proposal. And then if not funded, we will take a look and understand where the shortcomings were. So when you do try to resubmit, we do help you there. We do have folks who work with us to specialize in registrations. So one of the things that you'll find out is it takes about 3 to 6 weeks to get registered for all of the different websites that you need to go through it. So we'll work with you on that. And when funded, we have a consultant who works with us to help you understand the accounting requirements, and we'll walk you through setting up the basics of setting up your accounting system so you can be compliant. And Julian has already outlined the importance thereof. So that's the basics of what we do. And again, if you do want to reach out and get the assistance, down in the bottom left is the website, and that's what I need you to do in order for us to work together. The service, again, is provided at no charge to Massachusetts companies. So what steps should pre-startup and startup teams to do to prepare to apply for an SBIR? Well, Julie hit it out of the park with follow the rules. That's, read and write. They actually have human beings whose job it is to measure your margins and check your font sizes, but then they love to throw you out before they have to read anything, because it's one less proposal that has to be reviewed. And start that registration process early. Know all of the places you need to be. There's nothing more frustrating than working with a client on a phase 1 or phase 1 proposal And we've gone through the process. We've written a beautiful proposal only to know that only to find out that they had not registered in time. One of the websites did not approve them because of a minor glitch. And then 6 weeks of work or 4 weeks of work, depending on how much time they put into it, goes to the next round, or worse, that doesn't come out in the next round, and we've missed the shot at the topic. So if I'm going to say anything that pre-startup teams should do is to prepare to apply and make sure that you have freedom to operate. Make sure that there's nobody else that's got this patented up front, and that you have at least an understanding with the university that you're working with, if there is one, on how you're going to utilize this technology and who owns the IP. Then pitfalls and good practices, there's 1,000, so I can only get into minor pieces, but I'd say that make sure that you know the research and you can show that this research is innovative. Don't come to the table with iteration. This is not small business iteration research. This is small business innovation research. Be certain that you understand state of the art and you can show your differentiator and how this technology is going to move the needle, and not that it's going to improve things a little bit. It does have to truly be a technical risk. I also do venture capital pitch decks, and one of the things I can always tell is when a company has already been pitching for venture, because they spend all of their time in writing their first phase one, showing it's not risky, which is exactly the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing here. So make sure that you can do this, and make sure that you can actually discuss your technology and feel comfortable about it, because there's nothing worse than reading a proposal where the company is truly trying to hide what's going on. And there's basically a hole in the description of the entire technology. If you can't discuss it to the point where potentially these reviewers could steal your technology, in all likelihood, you're probably not going to get funded, because they're going to wonder exactly what's going on. So be prepared to disclose. And the other thing that's very important, make sure you have a strong team. Rule number one, never bring a knife to a gunfight. Make sure that if you have needs of specific technical requirements, that you have the people who can do the work, but not just that can do the work, that on paper demonstrate an ability to do the work. Sometimes we have to bring people onto teams that I've worked with where the team could have done it without them, but we needed the technical capability and the qualifications in order to meet the specific need that these reviewers are going to be looking for. So make sure that you've got the right team to do the job that you're describing. And then I guess tips for maximizing value of an award. Be sure that it's really what you're doing and it is within your main goal. Don't deviate from your main goal. Make sure that the work that you're doing is going to further the technology as you want to commercialize it. I have seen people veer off from their path, get this funding, and have it actually slow down their ability to commercialize. And at the same time, make sure that the work that you're proposing is actually what the government's asking for. Don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole here. Make sure that the work that you're doing is focused on what the government's asking for. Again, remember, you're not selling, the customer's buying, and it's not worth trying to propose something that does not meet the topic being requested. Lastly, to maximize an award, chunk the work if you can. Take a serious look at the steps that are going to be necessary for you to bring this technology forward and bring it to market. If there are ways that you can do smaller pieces and get more SBIR funding to do so, make sure you do that. I currently have a drug that I worked with in phase 3 clinical trials, and we got 2 phase 1s and 2 phase 2s from NIH and a phase 1 and phase 2 from NSF before we had to go to venture capital. And one of the things that's important to note with SBIR funding is that it is not just the money that you get, it is the credibility that comes with it, as Julian had outlined. But I have had clients that came to me after already receiving a seed round and an A round of venture, and the company had said, well, I'm not going to go any further, even though you've hit some milestones, until you get a little bit more de-risking done. So go get yourself an SBIR and prove that your peers buy into this, and then I'd be willing to release the next tranche. So sometimes it's actually not the money, it's the credibility that's more important. So make sure that you utilize the SBIR process to maximize your venture capital opportunities. And there's a billion other things I could say, but these were the questions, and keeping it at a high level, I think I hit as best I can.
Thank you, Dan. That was great. And just for the room, Dan and I are discussing scheduling regular office hours through IALS Venture Development. So stay tuned for that. And of course, you can reach out to Dan directly. It's amazing. It's an amazing free resource that we have here. All right, Vinit.
Thanks, Karen. I'm going to have to try to avoid the sun that's streaming in here to my home office. So it's hard to sort of fill in too much because quite a bit of what you need to know has been said already. So I might just float up at a little higher level. So the SBIR program's been around a long time. It's definitely been around as long as I've been an entrepreneur, which is 30 plus years. And what's really changed though in the last decade or even in the last 5 years is the focus on phase 3. So phase 3, which is really not part of the SBIR program, meaning it's not government funding, is commercialization. And for many years, there were several companies around here in the greater Boston area, like Foster Miller, Physical Sciences, who became fairly large companies just on SBIR contracts. And really, they were almost like an extension of a university, doing research for the sake of research, and not much was being commercialized. That's changed a lot. All the agencies other than DoD, so DoD is kind of an unusual agency in that they're also the customer, meaning the research that's being done and the technology that's being developed generally is going to be used by themselves. Whereas for NSF and NIH, it's going to impact a broader population, not just soldiers. And so, so this focus on commercialization has sort of resulted in these, supplemental programs that Julian talked about, like Phase 2B, like, the ability to spend money on stuff other than just your science and technology. And increasingly, as you get further along towards Phase 3, the agencies really want to see that you've got a shot at being a real company that's going to bring something to the market. And now I'm going to switch gears a bit and talk about, how venture capitalists would look at SBIR funding. So, for many of you, that there's two kinds of funding. When you're launching a company, there's non-dilutive funding, meaning these are grants. SBIR is one of those kind of grants. There are other grants like state research grants. Several of the people that are on this call have received like the Catalyst grant, Julie knows, and others have received state grants. But non-dilutive funding really, as Dan has said, and Julian has said, provides two things. One, of course, it provides money to de-risk science and technology, right? And that's really important for the other side, which are dilutive investors. So dilutive investors are like venture capitalists or angel investors who take a piece of your company, for the investment that they make. So they're really betting on the future success of your company. Most dilutive investors look upon non-dilutive funding very positively, especially in this world, in the deep tech world, which is, predominantly what SBIR funds. Less important if you're a pure software company trying to do, marketing automation or something like that. But SBIR funding, one, de-risks science and technology, right? So investors are usually willing to take on market risk and some management team risk, but they really like to see the science and technology de-risk, especially stuff coming out of universities. And the second is it's really a signal about the technology itself, because there's an assumption that these are all peer reviewed. So the peers that are reviewing these SBIR applications that you're creating, have different points of view, and that if you convince them and to give you the money, the grant, then you must have something that could be valuable, at least from a technology point of view. Maybe not as much as a market point of view, but definitely technology point of view. I think let me see, I'm looking at my notes here. So MassVentures, in addition to being a standard kind of investor who likes to see companies getting SBIR grants to de-risk your science and technology, we also, for the past 9 years, have operated a granting program for Sbir Phase Two winners. Now, this is state money. It has far few restrictions. You can spend the money on all kinds of things. You're not restricted to spending it just on science and technology. And over the past 9 years, we have, let's see, I'm looking at the numbers here. We've placed about $25 million, not an insignificant amount, to 85 companies, Massachusetts companies, and who have then gone on to raise $2.5 billion in follow-on funding, predominantly from private capital. And just sort of, nobody talked about this, but Massachusetts companies get a disproportionate amount of SBIR funding as compared to other states, on a per capita basis. So we have about $250 million in SBIR, STTR funding that flows into Massachusetts companies. Has a big impact on our startup ecosystem. And it's, I think, particularly useful for academic spinouts. As Dan was saying, that's a big focus of what he does. I would also say that a third of our START grant winners have been companies founded by women, Black, or Latinx entrepreneurs. So, we really like those kind of companies to apply. So we're in an open cycle for START right now. So if any of you have had Phase Two SBIRs, and by the way, we have a 3-phase program too. In Phase One, it's $100,000. Phase Two are only for Phase One winners, and that's $200,000. And Phase Three are only for Phase One and Two winners, and that's $500,000. So if you won all 3 phases, that's $800,000 from the state. So it's pretty significant. It's worth looking at and applying for. Tips for maximizing the value of an award. That's a tough question. I think somebody alluded to the fact that sometimes getting an SBIR award can distract you from the commercialization path you need to be on. I think that's not a good idea. So, hopefully you're only applying for SBIRs, not to pay for some salaries, but it should be aligned with the commercial path that you're on. And if it is aligned with the commercial path you're on, the best kind of use of that money, as I said, is to de-risk your science and technology. Go do the killer experiment or experiments that are needed. You can't, I think Julian would know this better than me, you can't really spend it on capital equipment. So even though we'd love, as a dilutive investor, we'd love you to spend it on capital so you don't use our money. but you can't really spend it on that. So you really got to focus it on de-risking your science and technology path. I think I touched on everything, Karen, did I?
Yes, I think you did, Vinit. Thank you so much. So we have, I'm just going to give everybody a last look at our panel and say we're going to move into a few minutes of discussion and Q&A. So thank you. For more information, I want to remind everybody that there will be a recording available, and you all know where to find me, and by extension, you know how to find all of the other panelists as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, if I can figure out how to do that, and open the discussion. We had a number of questions come in. I think many of them have been answered, at least a little bit in our discussion. But I wanted to throw one open to all of the panelists. We had a couple of questions about how to be more competitive. We had lots of good answers already in terms of make sure you follow the rules, make sure you read the directions, make sure you're responsive to the solicitation. But what else can you do to get a competitive edge? Success rates are typically below 20%, sometimes well below 20%. So what can you do to increase your odds of success?
I'll jump in for a second. A lot of these have been touched on before, but I think they're really important to highlight. One is having a good team. And if you have a small team, even if it's one, but even two people, that's okay. But what I think the reviewers like to see is that you figure out who you're going to hire if you get the grant. And not only who you're going to hire, but what does their resume look like? Are they qualified? Are they technical? They'll only fund for phase one. They'll only fund technical people, unless it's indirect, but we can get into that later. So that's really important. Team is so important for review. Two, we've already talked about this, but IP. You need to have some sort of distinguishing, something that's cutting edge and something that you can protect with IP, whether it's trade secret or patent. They typically like to see patent. If it's not patented or patent pending, that's okay. As long as you lay out your plans to say, this is what I'm going to patent. This is how I'm going to patent it. This is when I'm going to patent it. As Julian said, they don't fund patents, so I wouldn't ask for that. But you need to make it so clear that what you're doing is distinguished and that there is IP in there. And customer discovery, I'm dead serious. It's always a point that we have on review boards is, have they done their customer discovery enough so that they understand their markets? And if there isn't specific data in there, we question the validity of the science and if it's really needed.
So thank you, Julie. I will. That gives me. Did you know you were giving me a shameless plug? So I just want to remind everybody we opened applications for the local I-Corps program today. It's funded by the National Science Foundation. We have a site on campus. The whole point is to help you get started with customer discovery.
One of the things I would argue, sorry.
No, go right ahead, Dan.
That if you really are looking to improve your chances, it's really important for you, to know state of the art, know everything that's been done in the area. One of my best clients who went on to win great awards ended up getting dinged on not citing a paper published in 1972. So I'm fairly certain one of the review panel members was on the failing paper piece that was written, but know state of the art and make sure that you can cite it and do cite it. And secondarily, and most importantly, know the risks and have a plan for fixing those. I can't tell you how many reviews I've seen that have beaten someone up for not understanding what could go wrong and what would be the next step if something didn't go as planned. Without knowing those two things going into it, it's going to be really hard to win.
One thing I'll throw out there that's not specific to NSF, but I think is it's probably one of the most crucial factors in terms of increasing your chance of winning, especially, my personal experience is with DoD here, but there is a call-in period, and you need to actually pick up the phone and call the program officer who is open to the solicitation. If you don't, you won't win. I mean, I think I can't say that with 100% certainty, but you'll have a much better understanding of what their expectations are for the proposal. They will explicitly tell you what it is that they're looking for and how they're evaluating the proposals that are coming in, what they would anticipate seeing from the winning proposal that they choose. Generally, they will choose several to validate a couple of different solutions, and then from there, they'll choose which phase one they would like to see progress into a phase two. Again, this is specific more to the DoD side, but if you are answering a solicitation, make sure that you're reaching out to that program officer if their information is available. And if it isn't, maybe do a little digging and find out if you can get that information and reach out to them. It will pay dividends.
So let's also, let me just also, we have time for one final question. So I would just love to hear a little more about letters of support, actually, because I think they're very important too. And I've seen some people who send out a blanket sort of template for the letter of support. And they've done that because all 5 letters of support, when you read the application, look exactly the same. I have provided letters of support. IALS Venture Development and I-Corps are here to support SBIR applicants. But what do you, Julian and Julie, what is the process you have used for getting letters of support?
I'll go first, just briefly. Start early and expect it to take much longer than you'd expect. You're on other people's schedule now. So, if the deadline to get these letters of support in is in a week, good luck. Really, you should be reaching out to a number of people. I'd say diversity in who you're getting your letters of support from too. It's great if you've got 5 letters from investors, but I'm pretty sure that the reviewers would also like to see a diverse pool that includes some potential customers who are interested in potentially piloting this program and saying, we see a lot of applications for this technology for our current business needs. Again, investors are a good one. Folks who can validate the technology, thought leaders and folks from academia that can say, I've worked with this particular person and this technology is just stunning. You really want people on Karen's point, you don't want to necessarily have a set template, but you do want to, in my experience, write something for them to then have a jumping off point, and then they can edit it and make it different. And maybe they send you something that's completely new that they wrote themselves. That's excellent. If not, you want to, I hate to use the expression like grease the wheels, but you want to make it as simple as possible, frictionless, for them to be able to return a signed letter of support for you. So those are some of the big ones that I would touch on in terms of the strategy for getting some letters.
Julie, anything to add?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, a mix of customers and funders and experts, people who can validate your technology and validate the need in the market.
And a partner that may have access to market, who may be someone who'd be willing to license or manufacture for you. And I'd argue most importantly, this is very important to remember, that a weak letter of support is worse than no letter. If it comes through and it doesn't say anything, and it doesn't make a strong enough point that this is truly valuable, then it is screaming, we didn't like this enough to put our name behind it. Therefore, we didn't commit to this. So it would be better not to submit a weak one than to submit it. Especially
Investor letter of support. I can't tell you how many proposals I see with kind of, obviously no investor is going to give you a binding letter of support for your SBIR proposal, but you can tell just from the way it's written, the ones who are serious and the ones who are just checking a box to help somebody out. And so those ones you have to scrutinize considerably. I think and investors, by the way, are a proxy to customers. I think it's better to go directly to customers. And your best letter of support from a customer, and frankly, it's the same if you're raising money, is somebody saying, hey, if this technology does ... there's a strong likelihood that, we will put it into our budget to procure. I mean, that's, if you can get that should be your goal, right?
And I'll say, note what they say. If they can do ... that's your mission.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do. Yeah.
That is a great note to end on. It's 4:02. I know that the recording is going to end. I am happy. I know that Dan needs to leave. I want to thank the entire panel. I am happy to stay and answer questions. I welcome any panelists who can stay for a free-form discussion. Thank you all for coming, and we will be providing the recording for you as well.
Thank you.
And thank you, Karen, for being our moderator today. And I just wanted to let everybody know our next seminar is scheduled for Thursday, March 25th, where we'll be talking about securing your seed round. So save the date and we hope to see you all there.
Have a good
And
day.
Lisa, just save the chat as well, please, so that the chat has really good sort of content in it with links and stuff. And